All right, folks, we're going to look at presentation drawings tonight. So we will be looking at how you can provide some extra color to your drawings. First of all, we'll be looking at how color can be added to your projects by using your regular room plans, so your regular floor plans in Revit, and also by area plans. Now, just a little recap on area plans. Now, when you place a room object into Revit, typically the area of the room is calculated from the face of finish. Now, you have a few options here with regards to the area that the room reports. On the Architecture tab, under the Room and Area drop-down panel here, you can see there's area and volume computations. Now, what this will do, you can ask Revit to calculate the area of the room. By default, it's at the face of the wall, but you can choose other locations, so say the wall center, and then your room areas would be larger, because now the room objects, instead of going to the face of the finish, folks can see they're going to the center of the wall. Now, often for doing specific kinds of area calculations for your project, the room object will not provide enough specificity for the kinds of areas that you need to calculate. So if you need to do a gross building area calculation for a development permit set, often there will be exclusions and inclusions and ways of calculating the areas that are not compatible with Revit's room object. And unless, of course, you put room objects in your elevator cores, those areas would be excluded, and they might not be excluded in your municipality's zoning bylaw. So this is why we have area plans. So if you folks go to the View tab here, we're going to go to the Plan Views drop-down, and we're going to talk about this thing right here, area plan. Now, area plans are a set of plans that are different than the room objects. We talked about area plans briefly in week 8 when we talked about rooms. But here, I'm just going to bring this up again because we're going to be talking about presentation plans using both your regular floor plans and also area plans. Now, before we even get started with an area plan, remember that we have what Revit calls area schemes. And these are also found on the Architecture tab in that same panel under Room and Area before, when we talked about these, where the area calculations are being taken from for room objects. Now, this other tab I'm going to show you here, these are the different kinds of area schemes that you would have on a project. Now, by default, Revit uses BOMA rules. So that's Building Owners and Managers Association, BOMA. Now, if you don't know what BOMA means, then the way Revit does areas out of the box is going to be a bit of a hassle. Henry touched on that. But BOMA rules are important to some people, and BOMA rules are in use here in Vancouver by any company that calculates leasable areas for buildings. Yeah, let's just talk about here for a second. Area schemes. So first of all, you need to have area schemes. Now, each area scheme will allow you to create a completely separate set of area plans. Oh boy, that's going to be hard. And I just realized I don't have my markers with me. They might be down in the car. Boop.
There, I'm sitting on the board and 2 rooms down that way. Oh, right.
Oh no, it's okay, I'll grab it. It looks more legit when a teacher steals it. That's where I got it. So first of all, area schemes. So those are found on the Architecture tab. And you can have as many different area schemes as you want. So you might have one, that's for your gross building area. And that might be needed for your DB application. Then, you might have another one. That would be your net versus gross. So this would be lease areas. And you might have yet another scheme for your building permit application. So if you've got some firewalls and you want to show or calculate the area of the building on each side of the firewall, you can have a scheme for that. Once you've got a scheme, each scheme has its own set of plans. For each story. So for instance, if you want to create your gross building area, you make the plans, then you add area boundaries, and then you add area objects. So in each set of plans, you put in these purple area boundaries, they're polylines, and then you put an area object inside the bounded area. Create the scheme, create the plan, put in the boundaries, put in the area objects. So out of the box, Revit has these two schemes made ready for you. So you can see there's one there, gross building. So if you want to use that for your development permit set, that's fine. If you want to use it for your building permit set, that's fine, whatever. The gross building scheme can't be named. So that one that you see in row number 1, you can't rename it. You can see it's grayed out. So if I want to do one here, so building permit areas, area of the building per the BC building code. So there's another scheme. And then finally, like I had up as an example up there, net versus gross. Okay, so I have 3 different schemes. So now that that is done, there's 2 ways I can do this. On the Architecture tab, from the Area drop-down, I can create an area plan. So I can do it here on the Architecture tab, or on the View tab, I can choose from the Plan Views drop-down, Area Plan. They both do the same thing. So here's what happens. I hit the Area Plan button. Revit then asks, which scheme am I creating an area plan for? So here I'll do building permit areas. And now I can choose which of the plans of my project do I want to create these building permit areas in. So I could choose one, or I could choose, here I'm holding down the shift key. I can add area plans for every story of my project. So if I hit OK, I'm going to get a whole bunch of these new area plans. Now here for gross building, same thing. So already over here in the project browser, you can see there have been some area plans already created. So I'm going to create some more area plans here in a different scheme. I'm going to explain why I'm hitting no to this It's saying automatically create area boundary lines with exterior walls. I'm just going to say no. And now it's going to do this for each of the different stories here. And now under gross building, you can see I have an area plan for each floor of my project for this scheme. So once you've created these schemes, you have to create area plans for those schemes, or you have nothing. You can create the scheme and yet not have any area plans in that scheme. So here when we go to area and volume computations and area schemes, you can see that I don't have any area plans using this net versus gross. Not yet. But you can see how easily they were created. So I go to the View tab, Plan Views drop down, choose Area Plan, and now for net versus gross, I would just, Control click or Shift click all the different levels for which I want area plans for this scheme. So each scheme has its completely different set of floor plans, and the reason is that the polylines that you have inside these plans to calculate the building's area are going to be in different locations depending on the scheme. Because for the building code, it puts its exterior area line, if you will, at a different location than when you're doing it for a development permit, right? Because in Vancouver, if it's a rain screen wall, you can subtract that line in 6 inches from the face of the exterior wall. Because the Vancouver building bylaw recognizes that if you're doing rain screen, your wall's getting thicker, so they allow you a 6-inch bonus in terms of where that line sits. Normally, you'd have to calculate your area to the outside face of the exterior wall. But if it's a rain screen wall, Vancouver allows you to pull that line 6 inches inboard. And of course, as you guys know, every square inch of floor space in Vancouver is worth $1,000. So you got to save all the square footage you can. So what we would be able to do then in an area plan is to have our area boundaries inboard 6 inches on our exterior wall. So let me just illustrate. So we made the area plan, and now on the architecture tab here, here's the next step. Putting in these area boundaries. Now, unlike a room object, which you can just plunk into a space, and you can see it, and it finds its bounded area, areas they won't find themselves as being bounded. See, it says not enclosed. And the reason is that there are no area boundaries. Area boundaries look like this. They are purple and they are thick. There is an area boundary. So as soon as I bound an area object with area boundaries, the area is now live. It calculates its size. So if I want to calculate the area of my building per the Vancouver zoning bylaw, I would use the area boundary tool. And now you'll notice that as soon as you use the area boundary tool, Revit does this apply area rules. Now Henry showed this to you, and it can be a pain in the butt sometimes because it does everything, like I said, by BOMA rules. So you could read up and find out what BOMA rules, what they mean. So if I do this, Revit will just put it at the center line of the wall. And that's not going to fly. We have to be a little bit more specific here. So I'm going to undo those last 2 steps. So I'm still going to use the pick tool, but I'm going to uncheck this apply area rules. So now I can go in by my rules. And my rules state that it's going in at a 6-inch offset from the exterior wall line. So with a 6-inch offset, I can zoom in on my exterior wall here, and there you can see that's 6 inches in from the outside wall. Go to the next wall, 6 inches in. There it is, next wall, 6 inches in. Now you can see the area boundaries are automatically filleting themselves. Here at the curtain wall, area rules would be fine. It'll just put it at the outside face of the curtain wall. And here as well. So any place where there's curtain wall, I'll just run with area rules. It's actually fine in terms of where the line is sitting. Now here we got a bit of a gap, so we've got to use the trim command to fillet those area boundaries together. Come around again, back to the area boundary tool. There's that line, and we're good. So now we just need to clean this up a little bit. There. So now I can get rid of these other boundaries here. So now, there's probably some other exclusions that I might be able to dredge up out of the Vancouver zoning bylaw. But now I have an area of the building that is specifically catered to the needs of this plan, which is to get our gross building area per the Vancouver zoning bylaw.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You get it to be in 6 inches as opposed to out 6 inches.
So when you're putting that area boundary in, uncheck area rules,
Yeah,
and then you see the offset value here.
yeah.
And then when you zoom in on the wall, you kind of have to watch which way you run the mouse. So a few pixels above, it offsets it up. A few pixels down, it offsets it down. See, it's a finesse thing. You kind of have to sometimes slow down your mouse speed a little bit. I know there's some people who have their mouse sensitivity set right off the charts. And here you kind of need to be, in close enough so that you can fine tune which side of the wall you're offsetting to. Now, that is an area boundary here. And if there are rooms in this view, and there will be, the room objects are still here. See that? That's a room object. Your room objects will appear in your area plans, but your area objects will not appear in your regular floor plans. And in fact, any area boundaries that I make here, so these area boundaries that I've made in this scheme will not appear in the other schemes, right? Each area scheme has its own plans and its own area boundaries and its own area objects. That's the concept. So area plans should be used by you to calculate the area of the building according to the needs of the areas you wish to calculate, whether it's your building permit areas, zoning areas, or some other need on behalf of your client. Now, whether it is a room or an area object, you can now color your floor plan based on some parameter in your area or room objects. Now, I'm going to go back to my level 1 floor plan here. Oh, look, an entry foyer. I wonder what an entry foyer is. I hate misspelling. My mother was an English teacher. So now what we can do is we can colorize this floor plan by some parameter that we choose. Now, to get this whole party started, we have to go to the Architecture tab and choose, is it Architect? Maybe it's Annotate. Annotate, there it is. Color Fill Legend. So this is the button that flicks a switch that turns this into a colorized floor plan. So you click the button and you put the little legend into the view, and Revit says no color scheme assigned to view. Clunk. Now at this point, Revit says, what kind of an object are you going to color this plan by? So you can choose the room object, and it may show you a different kind of an object in this drop-down list, but for architecture we stick to coloring the room object. And then below that, we can colorize by one of the other parameters that we choose. Now, if I choose something like department, based on the values in the department parameter for each room, now before I do that, here when I click on the room object, look at all the different parameters here. Name, image, comments, occupancy, department. Now, in our sample project here, someone's typed in some values here. There's been a few things that have been typed in already. But if you look here at occupant, it is blank. Any of these parameters that you can see here can be used to colorize the rooms. So when we put this color fill legend in, you can see I can choose, well, nothing yet, just those two. So if I choose name, for instance, now and hit OK, each room in the project that has a unique name, so here you can see room, it just says room right now. Now if I were to change this to meeting room, what's going to happen is Revit's going to give it a new color straight away. So what happens is that as you begin to add new values for whatever parameter we were using here, it was the name, of course, that it's colored by right now, Revit automatically assigns a new color in this list. Now you can come back and change it later. So initially, as you are adding new values for, whether it's the occupancy parameter or the room name, Revit will automatically assign it a color, which will suck, and then you have to come back and change it later. So here, if I go and change this to meeting room, it automatically changes to match the color of this other room, which Revit automatically assigned a color to as well. So here we are coloring by the room name. So if we want to change colors, you click on your area scheme here, your little legend for the area scheme, the room legend rather, and you can see up on the ribbon that we can hit edit scheme. And here is where all the different colors are listed. So if you want to change these to some other Pantone colors, for instance here, meeting room is this crazy blue color. So if I want to choose something else, hit the color it's using, and then you can choose Pantone colors. Yeah, so all the different Pantone colors that are out there, you can choose one of those, and then you can hit OK. Now I think Revit is still going to do the same bug it's been doing for about 200 years. Watch this trick. The stupid Revit disappearing trick. What the heck? This has been doing it in Revit since about as long as I can remember. What it's done is it's put Revit to the background. So the first time that I don't know if it does it every time, when you exit out of choosing a Pantone color, it kicks Revit to the background. I have no idea why. So if you've got 5 or 6 application windows running at the same time, Revit gets sent to the back. So it's not the end of the world. So again, if you want to change a color, go in, hit Pantone, choose a color, hit OK. Like, that's so annoying, isn't it? Here's the way to solve that. Hit the Windows key on your keyboard, hold it down, and then hit M for Windows M. So Windows M. And what that does is it collapses all of your windows to the desktop. So if I didn't have this dialog box open right now, and I hit Windows M, I'm right back down to my desktop. So now if I bring Revit up, and I go back and start working on these colors again, so if I change this principal office here, choose a Pantone color. The reason that Revit didn't go to the background is because there's no other windows open. So little tricks to keep your sanity when you're using Revit. Definitely recommend that you do that when you're editing Pantone colors. So there you go. So now we can start modifying the colors and just making them a little bit less garish. Now, let's say that you wanted to color your rooms not by the room name, but by the occupancy parameter. So let's say that you're really looking at it from a building code perspective and you want to look at your, whether it's an assembly area or light industrial or residential. So you want to colorize your floor plans based on the building code occupancy. So here for this room, it's an assembly, so obviously that's assembly occupancy. So occupancy, I'll put in here A assembly. Okay, and so let's just say that we have some businesses down here. So this is going to be a classroom, this is going to be a retail. And this is going to be retail as well. Oh, nice purple color there, Revit. That's awesome. So if I click on this room now, its occupancy parameter is blank. So in here, for the occupancy, I can put E, mercantile. And so now, this thing's occupancy parameter has something in it. Now I can go to this next room object, click on it, and because I've already put in E mercantile, it'll be in this list and I can just choose it, so I don't have to type it again. So now we've got rooms that have some values in them for their occupancy parameter. Now how do we colorize this building using the occupancy parameter? Well, first of all, what we do is there's two ways you can get at it. In your properties palette, you can scroll down to the, where is it here? Color scheme button. See where it says here? It's colorizing by name. Click it, and it pulls up this list of colors. So basically, that's the same thing as just clicking on the legend and hitting Edit Scheme. There you go, same dialog. So what we're going to do is we're going to add or duplicate to create a new scheme. And we're going to call this Occupancy. There we go. Now right now, it says it's the occupancy scheme, but it is still coloring by the name parameter. So now what I want to do is I want to switch, so it's now colorizing by the occupancy parameter. So Revit's just telling me that instead of all the nice Pantone colors, which I have chosen, once I switch to colorizing by this other parameter, Revit's going to choose its own ugly ass color scheme, which you will then have to modify. And there it is. So you'll have to go through now and modify these. So you can see there was a couple of other occupancies used here. Meeting room, that's not an occupancy. So I'd have to go through and find out which rooms have that other. Okay, well I guess it's just those two. All right, so for a classroom here, again that's assembly. So I can choose here under occupancy, assembly, there it is. So if I had some, like a business of some kind, so here, we'll say here it's a lawyer. That is business and personal services, so occupancy, D, business and personal services. There we go. So now it's getting its own color. So that way, there's lots of different ways that you can color your plans, and then if you so desire, you can go into your legend, edit the scheme, modify the colors. Now the reason that you're seeing these other names here is there's rooms on other floors that have these these descriptions inside for their occupancy parameter, just not on this floor. So that's editing your colors. Now if you want to switch between schemes in your view, click on the legend, hit Edit Scheme, switch to the other scheme, hit OK. And now it colorizes the plans differently. Okay, so what happens if you want to have one plan that colors by occupancy and another one that colors by name? Two separate floor plans. Especially if you want to print them out at the same time. If it's okay, if this plan can serve double duty, colorizing by one method and then colorizing by another, and you'll just reprint, and you can do that too. Doesn't matter. Now, let's go over to page 3 here. Now, if you do not want your plans colorized after you have turned this coloring feature on, you must simply change the color scheme to none. And again, you can do it here under the color scheme button in your Views Properties, or you can click on the scheme legend, the color fill legend rather, and hit Edit Scheme. Either way you get to the same dialog box. Choose none from the top, hit OK. So now it's not being colored by anything, and your legend says as much. So again, if you wanted to, you can do it here. Color scheme is by department. Switch to none, hit OK, and away you go. So if your legend is gone, you can still add color to your plans by choosing the color scheme button where it says none, switch it to a different scheme. Hit OK. Now it colorizes it, we just don't have a legend. So we just need to add that legend back in. And there it is. Now what we're going to talk about right now is the legend itself. So when you click on the legend, instead of going to edit scheme, you can come over here to the properties palette. So you can define the typefaces being used for the title and for the descriptions. And so you can modify the size of the color swatches. So very helpfully and very descriptively, the out-of-the-box name for this legend or this color scheme style that you see here is 1. That's great, guys. Out-of-the-box thinking right there. So what would be better to do would be to maybe rename it so you can discuss the swatch sizes and maybe the size of the fonts being used. So here I'll call this 3/8 swatch. And what is that, 3/16 Arial. So that's just the text sizes that are being involved, right? So then if I want to make a different size for my legend here, I'll duplicate it. And so I'll make this one a little smaller, 1/4 inch swatch. And then 3/16, 2/16, 1/8 inch Arial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the height a little smaller, 1/4 inch. Make the text smaller. And make my title different here as well. So I'll leave it as 1/4 inch, that's fine. I'll make it 3/16, make it a little smaller. And I'll make it bold. So there you go. All it does, changes the fonts used and the swatch sizing. So you can have as many different swatch sizes as you want. You might want to have a smaller swatch style if you're printing to a smaller page size, like 11 by 17 or letter size, and then have a larger swatch size for your full size sheets. Alrighty, that is it for page 3. Page 4, let's just, again, we'll go back and look at coloring your project using areas. So in this other scheme that's already been created, the area boundaries, you guys won't have this in your projects. The area boundaries have been created, and some extra inside area boundaries were added as well to break these rooms up into separate spaces. So now you have multiple area objects here, and maybe, can I make a suggestion? When you're working with area plans, someone guess what might be a good category to turn off in your area plans? Well, no, something that you might confuse with an area object, the room object, right? And because, look at this, there's the room object, and there's the area object. Ask me how many times I've deleted my room objects in my area plans when I meant to delete the area object. I don't have enough fingers. I've done it a ton. So take it from me, when you're working in your area plans, so there's your areas, go down and turn those room objects off so you don't accidentally mess them up. So now the only thing that's in here are my area objects. So now I can colorize my area plans using these area objects. Now, if you're doing this for presentation purposes, you probably don't want to print the area boundaries. So what you could do in your visibility, and I think it's under lines, there it is there, your area boundaries. So in your area plans for presentation purposes, you'll probably want to turn those area boundaries off. And there you go. So you can see where the areas are being calculated to, right to that polyline, that area boundary line. So, and in here I could, of course, go into my scheme and recolorize this plan by whatever parameter was used. So here for their area objects, you know, whatever parameters you see here, you can colorize your area plans by those parameters. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 7:40 and we will carry on.